A single dorm bed, a total stranger in it. Personal space, a dead language. His whispered, "Sorry," in the dark, his breath on my neck, my heart pounding a frantic, forbidden rhythm. This is how my world ended, and how it began. One shared breath, one stolen inch at a time. Episode 1: The Arrival. The cacophony of my freshman year orientation, the blaring music, the over-enthusiastic chants, the sheer, overwhelming crowd of it all had left me with a pounding headache and one desperate mission: find my dorm room and claim my bed. The housing office, in their infinite, disorganized wisdom, had sent my room assignment email a dizzying 3 days late. By the time I wrestled my overstuffed duffel bag through the labyrinthine halls of Spruce Hall, the last of the welcome events was dribbling out into the humid night outside. Room 314. I fumbled with the key, the metallic scrape echoing in the quiet hallway. Pushing the door open, I was met with a predictable sight: standard-issued desks, 2 closets, a single window overlooking a parking lot, and one bed. A twin XL, to be precise, currently occupied. He was a landscape of long limbs and tousled dark hair against the pale sheets, backlit by the ghostly blue glow of a laptop charging on the desk. He wore a faded band t-shirt and sweatpants, one foot dangling off the side of the mattress. He didn't hear me at first, earbuds in, his head nodding slightly to a silent beat. I cleared my throat. Hey." He startled, pulling out an earbud. The light from the hallway caught his profile: sharp jaw, a surprisingly soft mouth. His eyes, adjusting, found me in the doorway, a deer in the headlights with a duffel bag. "Hey," he said, his voice a low, pleasant rumble. He sat up, swinging his legs over the side. "You must be the missing piece." "The what?" "My roommate. The housing folks said someone was coming just eventually." He offered a small, apologetic smile. "I'm Leo." "Kai," I managed, dragging my bag in. My eyes darted from the single, neatly made bed to the empty space where a second one should have been. A cold dread began to pool in my stomach. "So where's my bed?" Leo ran a hand through his hair, the gesture somehow both awkward and endearing. "Yeah, about that." He stood, and I was struck by how he seemed to fill the small room. "There was a situation, a flood on the 3rd floor. They had to move a bunch of people around last minute. The guy who was supposed to be here got shifted to a single." He paused, his gaze flicking to me, then away. "They said the replacement bed wouldn't arrive until next week, maybe 2. The words hung in the air, nonsensical. "Next week?" I parroted, my voice thin. "They told me at check-in," he nodded toward the bed. They said you and I should just share this one for now." A laugh, brittle and disbelieving, escaped me. "Share? A twin XL? With a stranger?" He shrugged, a faint blush visible even in the low light. "Their words, not mine. I tried to argue, but it was chaos. They handed me an extra pillow and blanket and basically pushed me along." He gestured to a neat stack of linens on the desk chair. "I saved those for you." I just stared. At the bed, which now looked about as wide as a tightrope. At Leo, who was watching me with a mixture of sympathy and his own palpable discomfort. The reality of my choices was stark. Sleep on the unforgiving industrial carpet, try to appeal to the housing dragon tomorrow, or share a mattress with a beautiful stranger. Defeated, I muttered, "This is insane." "Completely," he agreed softly, and that shared acknowledgement of the absurdity made the air feel slightly less charged. An hour later, the room was dark save for the sliver of streetlight cutting through the blinds. We'd performed a silent, careful ballet of getting ready for bed, taking turns in the tiny attached bathroom. We'd established a fragile, unspoken treaty. He would sleep on his usual side, by the wall. I would take the edge. The Grand Canyon of a 2-inch gap between us felt as vast as infinitesimal. I lay rigidly on my back, my body a rod of pure tension, clutching the edge of the mattress as if I might fall into an abyss. I could feel the heat radiating from him, a solid living presence in the dark. He smelled like clean cotton and a faint crisp soap. The silence was absolute, and therefore deafening. Every rustle of sheets was a thunderclap, every breath was a gust of wind. I was desperately trying to regulate my own breathing, to make it sound natural and sleepy, when he shifted. It was just a small turn onto his side, facing me. But in the confines of the narrow bed, it was a seismic event. His knee gently bumped my thigh. I sucked in a sharp breath, holding it. A beat of silence, then his voice, a sleep-roughened whisper so close it seemed to originate inside my own mind, floated through the dark. Sorry. The word wasn't just an apology for the contact, it was an apology for the entire bizarre, intimate predicament. It held a gentle awareness that made my skin prickle. I released the breath I'd been holding. "'S-okay," I whispered, the words barely audible. Another shift. This time he settled onto his back again, but he was closer now. The plane of his arm was a hair's breadth from mine. My heart was doing a frantic, wild tap dance against my ribs. I was excruciatingly aware of the entire length of my body, every point where the atmosphere thinned between us. "The housing office said to share," he murmured, as if answering a question I hadn't asked. His tone was wry, resigned. A faint, hysterical giggle bubbled in my chest. I swallowed it down. "So we're sharing?" "So we're sharing," he echoed. Minutes bled into each other. The initial shock began to melt, replaced by a hyper-alert fatigue. My eyes had adjusted to the dark, and I could make out the slope of his nose, the curve of his lip in the faint light. His breathing gradually deepened, evening out into a slow, steady rhythm. Just as I felt the first tendrils of actual sleep pull at me, he moved again. This time, in his sleep, a loose, languid roll toward me. His arm came across his body, his hand resting, open and vulnerable, on the sheet between us. And his face turned toward mine on the pillow. His breath, warm and even, fanned softly against the side of my neck. Every muscle in my body locked. A cascade of sensations detonated under my skin, a tingling heat that shot from my neck straight down my spine. Butterflies, not the gentle kind, but a swirling, frantic storm of them took up residence in my stomach. I didn't dare move. I barely dared to breathe. The scent of him was stronger now, enveloping. "This is crazy," I thought, the words screaming in the silent theater of my mind. "I am lying in bed with a man whose name I learned 3 hours ago, and he's breathing on my neck, and I don't hate it. I don't hate it at all. I'm terrified of how much I don't hate it." I lay there for what felt like an eternity, suspended in the dark, listening to the dual rhythm of his soft breaths and my own runaway heart. The rigid line of my body slowly, incrementally began to soften. The warmth of him was no longer just an intrusion. It was a quiet, persistent fact. The bed was small. He was here. I was here. And in the strange, suspended reality of this shared pillow, personal space wasn't just compromised. It was a myth. A beautiful, terrifying, completely extinct myth. And as I finally, reluctantly felt consciousness slip away, one last treacherous thought whispered through me. I couldn't remember what I'd been so nervous about at orientation. All the crowds, the noise, the unfamiliarity, it had all dissolved, leaving only this quiet, breathless darkness and the profound, unfamiliar intimacy of a stranger's sleep-soft sigh against my skin. Tomorrow I would deal with housing. Tomorrow I would seek logic and solutions. But tonight, Tonight there was just the whisper of shared breath and the thrilling, awful, wonderful sense that something had begun. Episode 2. Morning. The soft gray light of dawn was my first conscious sensation. The second was the warmth, a profound, solid heat that seemed to radiate through the thin sheet between us, seeping into my side. And the third was the weight, not an oppressive one, but a gentle, grounding pressure across my ankles. My eyes fluttered open, the events of last night crashing back into me with the subtlety of a freight train. The single bed, Leo, the whispered apologies in the dark. I was still on my back, still perilously close to the edge, but sometime in the silent, secret hours of the night, the geography of our shared territory had shifted. I dared to tilt my head just an inch on the pillow. He was facing me, sound asleep. In the pale morning light I could see him clearly, the dark sweep of his lashes against his cheek, the relaxed curve of his mouth, the faint shadow of stubble along his jaw. His breathing gradually deepened, evening out into a slow, steady rhythm. My breath hitched, stuck somewhere in my throat. I was studying him, mapping the details of a face I'd only seen in fragments. When his own breathing hitched, a small sigh escaped his lips. His eyes moved behind closed lids, and then, slowly, they opened. For one long, suspended heartbeat, we just stared. His eyes, a sleepy hazel in this light, held mine. There was no jolt of surprise, no awkward scramble away. There was just a slow, dawning awareness, a recognition that felt older than the single night we'd shared. A smile touched his lips, small and private, meant only for the intimate space between our pillows. His voice, a husky, sleep-roughened voice that slid right under my skin. Morning. It was a single word, but it felt like a secret handshake, a confirmation of the fragile alliance we'd formed in the dark. All I could manage was a weak, breathless echo. Morning. He didn't move away. He just blinked slowly, his gaze tracing over my face with a quiet curiosity that made my cheeks heat. The storm of butterflies from last night hadn't settled. They'd just learned to fly in formation, a constant fluttering hum in my chest. The spell was broken by the sudden blaring alarm from his phone on the desk. He winced, the smile turning into a grimace. "Duty calls," he murmured, his voice still low. 8 a.m. econ. As he pushed himself up, the sheet fell away, and the loss of his warmth against my side felt shockingly acute. He swung his legs out, giving me a view of his broad shoulders, the line of his spine under his t-shirt. He stood, stretched, and the hem of his shirt rode up, revealing a strip of taut skin at his waist. I quickly looked away, my face burning. The day was a study in exquisite tension. We moved around each other in the small room with a new, heightened awareness. Brushing teeth at adjacent sinks, our eyes would meet in the mirror and skitter away. Reaching for the same box of cereal, our fingers would almost touch, and we'd both pull back as if shocked. In class, I stared at notes I didn't see, my mind replaying that single whispered morning. The line between disaster and dream, which had felt so fragile last night, was now a thread I was desperately, eagerly trying to balance on. That night, the careful choreography resumed, the silent preparation for bed, the settling in on our respective sides, though the sides felt less defined now. The darkness, once a blanket of anxiety, now felt like a velvet cloak, hiding my nervous smile. We lay in silence for a while, but it was a different silence. It was expectant, full. "So," his voice floated through the dark, a gentle intrusion. "Econ, as thrilling as it sounds?" A small laugh escaped me. "A real page-turner. The professor has the enthusiasm of a dial-up modem." He chuckled, the sound a warm vibration in the space between us. My comparative lit professor might be worse. She speaks entirely in semicolons. We talked, just silly, trivial things, our terrible high school mascots, the mystery meat in the dining hall, the awkwardness of icebreaker games. And with every exchanged whisper, the bed shrank, not physically, but emotionally. The 2-inch gap became a canyon we were casually tossing words across, building a fragile bridge. Then a draft from the window snaked across the floor. A chill hit my exposed calf. I shivered. A moment later, in the dark, a sudden, shocking point of cold touched my skin. I gasped. It was his foot. He'd shifted, and his bare foot had come to rest lightly against my leg. "Oh, sorry, my feet are ice blocks," he started to whisper, beginning to pull away. But on impulse, a crazy, bold impulse born of the dark and the whispering, I stopped him. "No, it's okay." I shifted my leg just a little, so my calf pressed more firmly against his foot. The cold was sharp, then quickly fading, replaced by the warmth of contact, a direct, deliberate line of connection. He went very still. The entire room held its breath. Then a sigh, a soft, surrendering sound. His foot relaxed against my skin. "You're warm," he mumbled, his voice thick with a sleepiness I wasn't sure was entirely real. Those 2 words breathed into the dark did something irreversible to my insides. They were a confession, a permission slip, a promise. "Yeah," I whispered back, my own voice barely a thread of sound. "I guess I am." We fell asleep like that, connected by a single point of contact, his cold foot on my warm calf. It was a small thing, a ridiculous thing, but in the mythless world of our shared twin XL, it felt like a treaty had been signed, not just to share a space, but to share a warmth. And as I drifted off, lulled by the rhythm of his breathing so close to mine, I knew the thread I was balancing on wasn't between disaster and dream anymore. It was the thrilling, terrifying pathway straight to the center of the dream itself. And I was no longer afraid of falling. I was only afraid he might let go. Episode 3. The Storm. The world had shrunk to the size of our bed, and its new language was written in whispers and touch. That single point of contact, his foot on my calf, had become a permanent fixture, a quiet anchor in the dark. We woke up tangled more mornings than not, a knee here, an arm there, always with that same sleep-soft, secret smile. "Morning," he'd breathe, and it was the only gospel I needed. The days bled together in a haze of shared glances over textbooks and stolen sips from each other's coffee cups. We were building a universe in a 12 by 15-foot dorm room, and the bed was its buzzing electric core. Then, on Thursday night, the sky broke. It started as a distant grumble during dinner, a promise of violence in the thickening air. By the time we were side by side in the dark, the storm had marched to our doorstep. Rain lashed the window in furious sheets. Wind howled through the eaves of Spruce Hall like a lonely beast. And the thunder, it wasn't a sound, it was a physical force, a deep cracking boom that shook the very foundations of the building. I hated it. I'd always hated it. The uncontrollable fury of it made my skin feel too tight, my heart rabbit-quick and fragile in my chest. I lay rigid, staring at the ceiling, trying to memorize the water stains as if they were constellations that could guide me through the chaos. Another world-ending crack of thunder erupted directly overhead. The lightning flash was instant, bleaching the room a terrifying skeletal white for a split second.
I jerked violently, a small involuntary sound escaping my lips before I could clamp them shut. I felt Leo shift beside me, not away, but toward me. His head turned on the pillow. "Kai?" His voice was calm, a steady rock in the screaming turmoil. "I'm fine," I lied, the word tight and unconvincing even to my own ears. A particularly vicious gust of wind shook the window pane. I flinched again, squeezing my eyes shut. I was back in my childhood closet, counting the seconds between flash and bang, a ritual of fear. Then, under the sheets, a new kind of lightning. His hand found mine. It wasn't tentative, it was sure. His fingers slid between mine, his palm pressed flat against my own, warm and solid and utterly real. My eyes flew open in the dark, but I saw nothing. I only felt his calluses on his fingers, the steady beat of his pulse against my knuckles. "It's okay," he whispered, a breath so close it stirred my hair. His thumb began to move, a slow, deliberate stroke across the back of my hand. Every nerve ending in my body, which had been screaming at the storm, suddenly redirected its entire focus to that single point of contact. The thunder crashed again, but it was muffled, distant, secondary to the roaring in my ears. My chest felt too small, my heart now hammering for an entirely different, infinitely more dangerous reason. I couldn't speak. I just turned my hand in his, lacing our fingers together properly, holding on like he was the only thing keeping me from being swept away. He let out a soft, shaky breath that wasn't from fear. It was an answer.
We stayed like that, silent sentinels in the storm-whipped night. The thunder rolled and grumbled, moving eastward. The rain softened to a gentle patter. The frantic, panicked energy in the room slowly bled away, replaced by something thick and warm and syrupy slow. Our joined hands rested on the sheet between us, the only sound now the syncopated rhythm of our breathing, slowly falling into time. His thumb never stopped its gentle, soothing arc over my skin. It was a map. It was a promise. After a long while, when the storm was just a memory echoing in the distance, he spoke again. His whisper was rough, filled with a vulnerability that mirrored my own. "Better?" I swallowed, my throat dry. I could only nod, a useless gesture in the dark. He must have felt it, the slight shift of the pillow. He gave my hand a gentle, reassuring squeeze. "Good," he murmured. "Just that. Good." We didn't let go, not when the last of the rain faded, not when the digital clock on his desk flipped to 2:47 a.m. Our hands remained tangled, a settled, comfortable weight. The bed, which had once felt like a tightrope, now felt like a life raft. The space between us hadn't just shrunk, it had vanished, dissolved by a storm and sealed by a simple, heart-stopping clasp. I lay there, drowning not in fear, but in the scent of his soap and the feeling of his skin against mine. The myth of personal space wasn't just shattered, it was laughable, a silly concept for people who didn't know what it was like to have their entire world upended by a whisper and a touch. As I finally drifted into the deepest, most peaceful sleep I'd had in years, one crystal-clear thought floated through the calm he'd left in the storm's wake. This was so much scarier than thunder, and I never, ever wanted him to let go. Episode 4. The Kiss. The calm after the storm wasn't just in the weather, it was in us. A quiet understanding had taken root in the dark, watered by whispered reassurances and the lingering warmth of his hand in mine. We didn't talk about it the next day. We didn't need to. It was in the way he passed me the sugar for my coffee without asking, our fingers brushing just a second too long. It was in the comfortable silence that now felt full, not empty.
But at night, in our shared fortress of darkness, the air changed. It became charged, sweet, and heavy, like the moment before a summer downpour. We still talked, our voices hushed secrets passed between the pillows, but the topics grew softer, the pauses longer. We were orbiting something, both of us caught in a gravity we were too afraid to name, but too helpless to resist. Then, on a Tuesday, everything tipped. We'd been talking about nothing, a ridiculous campish rumor about the library ghost, and our laughter faded into a natural, breathless quiet. The room was pitch black, the kind of dark that feels like a velvet blanket. I could hear my own pulse in my ears. I felt him move, not a casual shift, but a deliberate turn onto his side, facing me. The mattress dipped, drawing me toward him by an inch. My body responded on its own, turning to mirror him until we were face to face in the abyss. I couldn't see him, but I could feel him, the heat of his skin, the faint whisper of his breath mingling with mine. The space between our lips felt like a living thing, buzzing with potential. His voice, when it came, was a ragged breath, so quiet it was almost lost in the sound of my own racing heart. "Is this okay?" The question wasn't about the turn or the proximity, it was about everything. The storm, the hands, the shared breaths, this slow, inevitable free fall. It was a check-in, a last chance to slam on the brakes. All the air had left my lungs. I couldn't speak. I could only manage a jerky, desperate nod in the dark, my forehead almost brushing his. He felt it. He let out a shaky, surrendered sigh, one that seemed to come from the very center of him. Then his hand came up. It was the same hand that had anchored me through the thunder. Now it hovered for a heart-stopping second before his fingertips, trembling slightly, touched my jaw. The contact was a lightning strike, gentle, devastating, and illuminating everything. He traced the line from my ear to my chin, a slow, reverent exploration that made my eyes flutter shut. "It's what I've wanted to do," he confessed, his whisper a raw, aching thing that sank straight into my soul. His thumb brushed over my bottom lip. A sob caught in my throat, but it came out as a whimper. I was dissolving, melting into the mattress, into his touch. He didn't ask another question. He just closed the last, impossible fraction of space. His lips met mine. The world didn't just dissolve, it atomized. Every thought, every fear, every stupid myth about personal space and stranger danger and college roommate etiquette vaporized in the soft, searing heat of his mouth. It was a first kiss that felt like a homecoming, sweet, searching, and so devastatingly gentle that it brought a hot prickle of tears behind my closed eyelids. My hands, which had been fisted in the sheets, came up of their own volition. One found the soft cotton of his t-shirt at his waist, clutching him closer. The other slid into the impossibly soft hair at the nape of his neck. He made a low, hungry sound against my mouth, and the kiss deepened, turning from a question into a conversation we were suddenly fluent in. We broke apart, gasping for air in the shared, heated space between us, our foreheads pressed together, our breaths coming in ragged, synchronized pants. "Wow," he breathed, the word a prayer, a laugh, a revelation. A giddy, disbelieving laugh bubbled out of me. "Yeah, wow." He didn't go far. His lips found mine again and again. Softer now, playful nips and slow, savoring kisses that mapped a new, perfect geography. We kissed until the darkness began to soften into the first hint of gray dawn, until our lips were swollen and we were drunk on each other. When we finally stilled, a tangled mess of limbs and shared breath, he pressed one last, lingering kiss to the corner of my mouth. "Kai," he whispered, my name a secret on his kissed, bruised lips. "Yeah, Leo?" He just shook his head, nuzzling his nose against mine, a smile in his voice. Nothing, just Kai. We fell asleep like that, foreheads touching, lips a breath apart,
in a bed that was no longer a compromise, it was a destination. And as I spiraled down into sleep, one truth burned brighter than the coming dawn. The freefall was over. We had landed, and we were flying. Episode 5. The Kingdom. The bed was still a twin XL. That stubborn, unchangeable fact should have felt like a constraint, a punchline to a joke that had long since stopped being funny. But somewhere between the first whispered "sorry" and the universe-altering press of his lips, the dimensions had changed. It wasn't a piece of dorm furniture anymore. It was a kingdom, our kingdom, and every night we claimed it anew. Waking up had become my favorite part of existence. No more rigid shock, no more panicked inventory of limbs. Now consciousness returned like a slow, sweet tide, and I was always already in his arms. This morning I woke to the steady, comforting thump of his heartbeat under my ear. My head was pillowed on his chest, one of his arms a heavy, possessive band around my waist, holding me flush against him. His other hand was splayed across my back, under my shirt, his skin a brand against my spine. The early light painted our tangled legs in stripes of gold. I stirred slightly, nuzzling into the soft cotton of his sleep shirt, breathing him in. Sleep, soap, and something uniquely, essentially Leo. His arm tightened around me instantly, even in his sleep. A low, incoherent mumble vibrated in his chest. He buried his face in my hair, his lips moving against my scalp. "Mine," he whispered, the words slurred with perfect, unconscious certainty. A shiver, warm and profound, rolled through me from my head to my toes. I closed my eyes, letting the word, the feeling sink into my bones. His. I must have drifted off again, because the next time I opened my eyes, the light was brighter, and he was awake. He was propped on one elbow, just watching me. His gaze was a soft, physical caress, tracing over my features with a tenderness that made my throat ache. "Hi," he said, his voice morning rough and intimate. "Hi," I whispered back. He didn't ask, he just leaned down and kissed me. It was a slow, deep, unhurried good morning, a kiss that tasted of sleep and promise and a lazy, endless future. When he finally pulled away, he didn't go far, just rested his forehead against mine, our noses brushing. "No classes today," he murmured, a smile in his voice. "None," I confirmed, my own lips curving. "Good." The day unspooled in a haze of delicious shared indolence. We left the fortress only for snacks, returning like thieves with our loot of chips and soda, immediately falling back into the sanctuary of the covers. We talked, we laughed, we kissed. We listened to music on a single pair of earbuds, sharing the same song, the same air. As the afternoon bled into evening, a comfortable silence settled. He was lying on his stomach, head turned towards me, eyes closed. I was on my side, tracing idle, sensuous patterns on the warm, exposed skin of his back. Over the firm planes of his shoulders, down the subtle dip of his spine, learning the landscape of him by touch alone. His skin pebbled under my fingertips. A contented sigh escaped him. My heart was so full it felt like a physical weight, a beautiful, aching pressure behind my ribs. The words had been building for days, weeks maybe, a truth too big to be contained by something as simple as air. I leaned in, my lips almost touching the shell of his ear. My voice was the softest it had ever been, a breath of sound meant for him alone. "I love you." The words hung in the golden, dusty light of our room. He went perfectly, utterly still beneath my touch. For one terrifying second, there was only silence. Then he moved. He rolled over swift and sure, coming to hover over me, caging me in with his arms.
his eyes dark and blazing with an emotion so fierce it stole my breath, searched mine. He didn't smile. His expression was one of raw, unveiled wonder. Slowly, he lowered his weight until he was pressed against me from chest to thigh, every hard line of him aligning with me. He cupped my face in both hands, his thumbs stroking my cheeks. He leaned down until his lips were a hair's breadth from mine, his breath mingling with my own. When he spoke, it wasn't a whisper, it was a vow, low, resonant, and utterly clear. "I love you more." And then he kissed me. This kiss was different from all the others. It was a seal. It was a celebration. It was a sensual, slow-burning confirmation of everything we'd whispered, everything we'd felt, everything we'd built in this tiny, myth-defying space. It was lips and tongue and shared breath. It was the press of his hips and the answering arch of my back. It was a language of touch that needed no translation. We kissed as the last of the sun painted our walls in fiery orange. We kissed as twilight bled into indigo night. We kissed until the only truth that remained was the feel of him, the taste of him, the sound of his name breaking from my lips like a prayer. Later, much later, wrapped in each other and the quiet dark, our legs intertwined, his lips found my temple in a perpetual, tender punctuation. Our myth had become our truth. Our cramped, shared bed was the widest, most boundless place in the world, and as I drifted into sleep, safe and claimed and gloriously, deliriously loved, I knew the final, cheesy, perfect chapter of our story wasn't an ending. It was just the first sentence of forever. Epilogue. 3 years later, we moved into our first apartment. The movers struggled with the one item we insisted on carrying ourselves, a worn twin XL mattress. They laughed. Why not upgrade? We just smiled, setting our kingdom gently in the center of the new, empty bedroom. That night, tangled in our familiar, perfect space, his lips found my ear. "Proof," he whispered, "that the best things in life start small." I kissed him, heart impossibly full. Our myth had grown, expanding to fill every corner of our shared life, but its soul, its truth, remained right here. So that was our story, the myth of personal space, rewritten by a twin XL mattress and 1,000 whispered truths. It makes me wonder, what's your myth? What unexpected corner of your life is quietly waiting to become a love story? If our journey made your heart flutter, please follow, rate, and share. Your support helps us keep telling tales that begin in the dark and end in the light. Thank you for listening. Until the next story, dare to share the bed.